Hey guys, Nick Espinoza, your chief security fanatic here, and today I'm asking the question, is it possible to fully eliminate bias from artificial intelligence and software programs? Now, here's what's going on that's making me actually ask this question, and I think you guys are going to find this absolutely fascinating. I found a ton of different articles on this, and basically what's going on is we are talking about Goldman Sachs and Apple computers. Now, a probe in a Goldman Sachs Group Incorporated's credit card practices has been initiated after tweets from a tech entrepreneur alleged gender discrimination with the new Apple credit card and basically their algorithms that are used to determine credit limits. Now, if you don't know who David Heinemeier Hansson is, he's the creator of a web application framework called Ruby on Rails. It's actually rather popular. Now, in a series of Twitter posts on Thursday, as in like a few days ago or so, Hansson railed against Apple Card for giving him 20 times the credit limit that his wife got. This is according to Bloomberg from a couple of days ago on Saturday. Now, by virtue of this tweet, New York's Department of Financial Services confirmed that they are now launching an investigation into the credit practices of Goldman Sachs, that which is backing Apple's credit card. So obviously it has the Apple logo, but the guts of this is being run by Goldman Sachs. Now, Hansson is actually not alone in this, and this is where it gets rather interesting. Apple's co-founder, Steve Wozniak, he is the nerd behind Steve Jobs' sales acumen, basically weighed in himself, and he tweeted as well, and I quote Wozniak's tweet: "The same thing happened to us. We have no separate bank accounts or credit cards or assets of any kind. We both have the same high limits on our cards, including our Amex Centurion card, but 10 times on the Apple card." In other words, Steve Wozniak and his wife have basically 100% joint accounts. Steve Wozniak is one of the richest men in the world. He's a multi-billionaire by virtue of owning a significant chunk of Apple, and so obviously him and Steve Jobs built Apple from the ground up, and his wife basically had 10 times less credit when she applied for an Apple card versus what the Woz got. Now, I find this absolutely interesting. I think it underscores something that a lot of us have been talking about for a while, in the sense that when we are creating these kinds of programs, whether it's artificial intelligence or a software program, or even Goldman Sachs, in terms of, let's say, the algorithms that basically calculate whether I get credit versus, let's say, my wife gets credit, why is it, let's say, favoring men in this sense? Now, both Hansson and Wozniak are very well known. They're obviously very wealthy individuals, in terms of this. But if they have joint accounts, then basically the way it should be weighed along with their spouses is that their spouses should get the same access to the same level of credit. In the case of Wozniak, he's literally saying that basically my wife has full access to the billions and billions of dollars I have, but she's getting 10 times less of a credit limit than what the Woz himself is saying, even though she has, let's say, 50% control of his billions of dollars. And I've actually written about this before, and I've talked about this before, not necessarily on gender bias, but bias that is inherent into the development and programming of artificial intelligence and systems before. If it is, let's say, created by, and the example I use actually in my very last TED Talk was a facial recognition system that was inherently biased because it was created by white males, and by virtue of that, they didn't have a lot of test subjects that were, let's say, of the other gender or minorities and all of that, and that really hindered the accuracy rate of the facial recognition system, and it seems like we may have something like this as well. I recently talked about Amazon and their hiring practices, where they had an artificial intelligence that was sifting through resumes, and it was actually demoting or lowering the score of women when it would find that, let's say a woman applied for a job at Amazon, and in her resume she had I'm the president of the local women's whatever, and that would automatically lower the score. Amazon claimed they did not actually use that artificial intelligence in their hiring practices. Nevertheless, it's there and it's been reported on. And so, is Apple the latest example of this. Now, I'm not necessarily blaming Apple, because Goldman Sachs, obviously Apple is essentially hired or partnered with Goldman Sachs to basically put the Apple logo on a credit card that is being issued by them. But it really underscores the question here of bias and how we are looking at people in terms of just giving them available credit or anything else, not to mention facial recognition, preferences, et cetera, et cetera. And so I think it's something that we really need to look at. It's something we really need to understand, because if we are looking at, let's say, some of the latest artificial intelligences that are coming out, and I literally just did a video in the last, let's say, 5 days on one called HireVue that is taking pictures of applicants for jobs and then scoring them, we have the potential to really open up biases in there, whether we are knowingly or unknowingly doing them. I think there's a lot of people that are just unconsciously adding bias into programs because of who they are, what their experience is, not taking into account that they're one gender or another, they're one race or another, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm not necessarily pointing the finger here saying Goldman Sachs is inherently biased against women, but possibly the people that developed the program, simply it just creeped into the system, or maybe they intentionally are. I honestly don't know. I have no inner working, or no knowledge of the inner workings of Goldman Sachs, but it's a question I think we need to understand, and we need to access as we proliferate programs, as we proliferate artificial intelligence into every aspect, whether it's facial recognition for law enforcement or simply a credit card application. It's something we really need to understand, basically how it's programmed, where these biases are, how do we fight against this, how do we create a system that ensures that everybody gets an equal starting line, not necessarily an equal finish. And so I think it's something that we really need to talk about. And so by virtue of that, I'd love to hear your comments, because this has been your news of the day. And please like, share, follow me here on Facebook and Twitter at NickAESP. And please feel free to subscribe to me at YouTube as well. And as always, stay safe and stay online. Thanks, guys.